Good evening. Today is July 24th, and this is Kingdom News. My name is Russell Sarup, and here are the headlines for today. Iranian Christian convert loses appeal of prison sentences 18 months after arrest. China tells the United States to close consulate in Chengdu in growing spat. Thousands of Israelis gather in Jerusalem to protest Netanyahu as virus cases soar. Now for the news in details. Iranian Christian convert loses appeal of prison sentences 18 months after arrest. An Iranian Christian convert convicted of being a member of a Zionist evangelical group has lost his appeal against two prison sentences he received earlier this year. Ismail Maghrabinejad, a 65-year-old member of the Anglican Church, was informed last week that two of the three prison sentences he received earlier this year have been upheld, while one has been overturned. According to the watchdog group, Maghrabinejad was told last Sunday that the charge of insulting the sacred beliefs of Muslims had been overturned on appeal. But last Wednesday, Maghrabinejad's two sentences for propaganda against the state and membership of a group hostile to the regime were upheld. Although the three sentences amounted to 6 years in prison, the non-profit notes that Maghrabinejad will likely only serve a 2-year sentence for membership of hostile group. The daughter stressed that her father has never been a member of any group that is against the regime. What kind of policy or laws is that condemns someone like my father to prison for doing nothing more than being a Christian, she asked. Earlier this month, it was reported that at least a dozen Iranian Christians were arrested across 3 cities. In Iran, it is illegal for a Muslim to convert to Christianity. Open Doors USA, a leading Christian persecution watchdog group that works in over 60 countries, labels Iran as the 9th worst country in the world for Christian persecution. A Catholic student who was removed from Florida State University's student government for scrutinized the views of Black Lives Matter organization is now appealing the students' Senate decision to oust him. Last month, Jack Denton, who was president of the FSU Senate and a member of the FSU class of 2021, was in a private group text message chat with the FSU Catholic Student Union when he criticized, from a Catholic perspective, the beliefs of BLM and other groups like Reclaim the Block and the ACLU, arguing that their positions were not in keeping with the church's teachings. His comments were later made public when a fellow student posted screenshots of his comments on social media. The Alliance Defending Freedom is representing Denton and sent a letter to the university's administrators on Wednesday appealing the student government's decision. The letter notes that the FSU junior appealed his removal to the Student Supreme Court in mid-June, but that the Senate refused to confirm a temporary Chief Justice before its regular session concluded, which then prevented Denton's complaint from being adjudicated in a timely fashion. Public universities should be fostering real diversity of thought, not discriminating against individuals based on their religious convictions or political beliefs. Under the guise of creating a safe space, FSU students banded together to cancel Jack's First Amendment freedoms and silence Jack because of his religion, in violation of the school's SGA ethics code and the student body constitution, he continued. A university that promotes true diversity allows students to wrestle with differing viewpoints instead of smashing dissent. The SGA Student Senate has failed to respect Jack's freedoms. That's why we're asking school administrators to step in and correct this constitutional violation. Since the Student Senate refused to fill the court vacancy in time to hear Denton's case, ADF attorneys are requesting that the FSU Vice President for Student Affairs schedule a hearing to consider Denton's appeal by July 29th. While nearly 90% of all Americans see the new coronavirus as a major threat to the US economy, far fewer, 67%, see the virus as a major threat to public health. And among Republicans, major concern about the virus drops to less than 50%, according to a new survey from the Pew Research Center. The survey, published just a day after President Donald Trump warned the coronavirus pandemic in the US will likely get worse before it gets better, showing that while Americans may be politically divided in how they view the threat of the virus on public health, there is nearly equal concern among both Republicans and Democrats about its threat to the economy. In a survey conducted July 13th to the 19th, 86% of Americans, including 88% of Democrats and 84% of Republicans, said that they view the coronavirus as a major threat to the US economy. Low-income adults were also much more likely than middle and upper income earners to see the virus as a major threat to their own health as well as their finances. The survey showed that 55% of lower income adults said COVID-19 is a major threat to their finances, compared with the 32% of middle income adults and 24% of upper income adults. The Congressional Budget Office recently projected that the coronavirus pandemic would shrink the size of the US economy by about $8 trillion over the next decade, according to a report in the Washington Post. The coronavirus pandemic has affected Americans' Bible engagement, with the number of US adults who read scripture declining drastically amid the outbreak, a recent study found. According to the State of the Bible 2020 report released by the Barna Group and the American Bible Society, United States adults who say they read the Bible daily dropped from 14% to 9% between early 2019 and 2020. Despite nearly every individual in the United States having access to the Bible, engagement has decreased, he said. That's been a consistent trend over the past few years, and the trend has accelerated since January 2020 throughout the pandemic. The church must transition from survival mode back into discipleship mode. And yes, that's going to take even more innovation. However, an earlier study from the American Enterprise Institute found that nearly 2/3 of American Christians are uncomfortable with returning to in-person worship services over coronavirus concerns. Numerous studies have documented how the faith of American Christians has been impacted by the virus, which has led to the deaths of 143,000 people in the United States as of Thursday. Over 60,000 has been raised to benefit two Houston brothers, both under the age of 15, who are now grieving the loss of both parents who died 2 weeks apart after battling COVID-19. Carlos Garcia, 44, and his wife of 24 years, Naomi Esquivel, 39, died just 2 weeks apart after battling COVID-19 this month. They leave behind their sons, Nathan, who is 11 years, and Isaiah, who is 14. I didn't get to say goodbye to my mom or my dad now, and that's what hurt the most. Isaiah Garcia told ABC 13. Rita Marquez Mendoza, their maternal grandmother, told the outlet that her daughter died from COVID-19 on July 2nd. She said that her son-in-law, who was recovering from the coronavirus, died last Friday, July 17th. We hadn't even begun to grieve my daughter, and now we have to bury Carlos, and the grandchildren are left without a mother and a father, said Marquez. This disease is just horrible. Garcia's funeral will be held next Wednesday at the Promise Church of Houston. The family is raising money through GoFundMe campaign to help provide the brothers. As of Thursday, nearly $61,000 has been donated to the fundraiser by nearly 1,400 people. The money being raised will be for their living expenses and anything they may need, organizer Daniel Esquivel wrote on the fundraising page. He noted that the family initially tried to raise money to help pay for Garcia's funeral, but a very generous donor offered to cover all the funeral expenses. At the last minute, we received a very generous donation that helped pay for all funeral expenses. Thank God, Esquivel explained. I just want to thank each and every one of you in advance and tell you that the family greatly appreciates you in our time of sorrow. As the U.S. wrestles with the reality of 4 million coronavirus cases, President Trump is asking Congress for an extra $105 billion in the coronavirus stimulus bill to help schools reopen safely. The funding would help schools reduce class size, hire teachers, buy masks, and rearrange spaces. The president has been promoting the need to reopen school for weeks, but on Thursday he acknowledged it might not be possible in the hardest hit areas. In cities and states that are current hotspots, he said, districts may need to delay reopening for a few weeks, and that's possible. That will be up to the governors. Still, he encouraged every school district to prepare to reopen, saying many districts can do so as long as they have the necessary measures in place. He also encouraged parents to make their own decisions about what's best for their children, even if it means leaving their public school. On Thursday, the CDC issued new guidelines for parents, much of it emphasizing the importance of reopening schools. It acknowledged how little is known about how the virus spread among children. It also noted some data that suggested that kids are less likely to get it and less likely to get seriously ill if they become sick. The National Institute of Health Director, Dr. Francis Collins, tells CBN News, COVID-19 is a diabolical disease because it's like nothing we've seen before. The National Institutes of Health Director Dr. Francis Collins tells CBN News that COVID-19 is a diabolical disease because it's like nothing we've seen before. At first, health experts saw the respiratory virus take aim at the lungs. However, 6 months later, they've learned the damage it can cause reaches far beyond the lungs. Several medical papers document a wide range of non-respiratory problems caused by COVID-19. Everything from stroke to loss of smell, he said, loss of taste, Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a reversible paralysis syndrome, to encephalitis that has been described, as well as a various amount of muscle pains and headaches. Often these issues go away, but some, such as stroke effects, can be permanent. Doctors fear there could be other long-term health problems. To prevent stroke damage, doctors recommend getting medical attention within 3 hours of experiencing stroke symptoms, which include facial drooping, arm weakness, and difficulty speaking. A growing number of pastors believe their churches will not meet in person until 2021 because of the coronavirus. As Christian Headlines previously reported, last week, Andy Stanley, pastor at North Point Community Church in suburban Atlanta, announced that they would not meet in person until 2021, becoming the first in what some believe will be a growing trend. According to Christianity Today, the Barna Group surveyed a group of pastors over the past week, and 5% of them said they did not expect to have in-person worship services for the rest of 2020. While the number may seem small, in May, there were no respondents who thought they would not meet until next year. Other recent Barna research explored how COVID-19 has affected church attendance among practicing Christians. They found that 32% of practicing Christians had stopped attending church, either in person or online during the pandemic. 35% are still attending their pre-COVID church and only their church. 14% had switched churches, while 18% of practicing Christians were viewing multiple churches online each week. In spite of Barna's findings, Stanley remains optimistic about the church's future after the pandemic. He said, "I'm absolutely confident that the church and our local churches will not only survive this, but I think we're going to thrive as a result." A coalition of more than 100 religious leaders and theologians, including some registered Democrats, sent an open letter to the Democratic Platform Committee Friday, urging it to reject taxpayers' funding of abortion and to embrace policies that support legal protection for preborn children. The committee is expected to release its proposed platform in the coming weeks. The letter was organized by Democrats for Life and includes signatures from former Fuller Theologian Seminary President Richard Mao, Baylor University Professor George Yancey, National Latino Evangelical Association President Gabriel Salguero, and 7 individuals associated with Notre Dame. The letter specifically urges the Platform Committee to reject taxpayers' funding of abortion. The 2016 Democratic Platform called for the repeal of the Hyde Amendment, a federal legislative provision that bars public funds from being used for most abortions. The letter continues, 79% of voters oppose elective abortion on demand, including but not limited to many people of faith. They deserve a home in the Democratic Party. The letter referenced a January Marist poll. Scripture supports a pro-life view on abortion. The letter says, inspired by the Christian faith, we note that the Bible calls us to speak up in favor of those who do not have a voice. Proverbs 31, 8-9, Matthew 25:45. We also note that life begins at fertilization. Psalms 22, 10-11, Galatians 1:15, Luke 1:41, Psalms 139, 13-15, Jeremiah 1:5. The letter says, finally, we note that abortion takes the life of an innocent, which is against Scripture. Exodus 20:13, 2 Kings 17:17, Deuteronomy 5:17, Revelation 22:15, Psalms 106:38, and Proverbs 6:17. Author and economist Lawrence Reed addresses the notion that Jesus was a socialist, while also offering some insight on why people are so drawn to socialism today. According to FaithWire on Tuesday, Reed told Eric Metaxas, a conservative Christian author and the host of the Eric Metaxas radio show, that Jesus was neither a socialist nor a capitalist. Dispelling the idea of the redistribution of wealth, Reed cited Luke 12:13-15. In the passage, Jesus denied a man's request of getting his brother to split an inheritance with him, saying that life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. That's what socialists are doing all the time, Reed told Metaxas. They act as judges and dividers over the rest of us, and they want to do more of it. I see no statement that Jesus ever made that supports forcible redistribution of wealth. In June, Reed published the book, Was Jesus a Socialist? Why this question is being asked again, and why the answer is almost always wrong. According to the book's description, a 2016 Barna Group poll found that people believe Jesus favored socialism, 24%, over capitalism, 14%. But 62% were either unsure or stated that Jesus was uninterested in political matters. Against prodding from his aides who argued that he could still hold the event safely, President Donald Trump reversed course on a plan to hold a portion of the Republican National Convention in Florida, noting that the timing for this event is not right, with the state experiencing a surge of coronavirus cases. The president made the announcement during his daily press briefing on Thursday, just weeks after the Republicans moved parts of the convention, set to take place August 24 to 27, from Charlotte, North Carolina to Jacksonville, after the RNC had to seek other locations to host their convention after Governor Roy Cooper had refused to guarantee that we can have the use of the Spectrum Arena, the president said on Twitter last month. Trump is expected to accept the Republican nomination for president during the convention. Everything was going well. A tremendous list of speakers, thousands of people wanting to be there, and I mean, in some cases, desperately be there. They wanted to attend. People making travel arrangements all over the country. They wanted to be there. The pageantry, the signs, the excitement were really, really top of the line, the president said about the Jacksonville convention. But I look at my team and I said, the timing for this event is not right. It's just not right with what's happening recently. The flare-up in Florida, to have a big convention. It's not the right time, Trump said. It's really something that, for me, I have to protect the American people. That's what I've always done. That's what I will always do. That's what I'm about. As of Friday morning, Florida officials have confirmed that more than 389,000 cases of coronavirus and more than 5,500 related deaths. I told my team it's time to cancel the Jacksonville, Florida component of the GOP convention, Trump said. The president explained that despite reports of the contrary, portions of the convention were always slated to remain in North Carolina, and it's expected to begin there with adjustments made to other parts of the event with the goal of keeping people safe. We'll be starting in North Carolina for the Monday, as has always been planned. We were never taking it off. That's remaining as it is. The delegates are going to get together. That's where they will do their nomination, Trump said. A group of Democratic state attorneys general is suing the Trump administration over its rule that allows doctors to decline performing abortions and transgender surgeries. The legal action challenges the administration's reversal of an Obama-era regulation that included someone's internal sense of gender, which may be male, female, neither, or a combination of male and female in its definition of sex discrimination. in Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act. The regulation also included termination of pregnancy in that same definition. New York Attorney General Letitia James is leading the effort and is joined by 23 other state attorneys general representing California, Washington State, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, among others. James has claimed that the challenge in language was tantamount to denying people health care, saying it was especially egregious to do so during a pandemic. Last month, the Trump administration revised those regulations, reverting back to the previous standard of sex discrimination, that which discriminates on the basis of biological sex. The Department of Health and Human Services announced it would enforce the contested section by returning to the government's interpretation of sex discrimination according to the plain meaning of the word sex, as male or female, and as determined by biology. The agency held the chain maintains vigorous enforcement of federal civil rights laws on the basis of race, color, national origin, disability, age, and sex, and restores the rule of law by revising certain provisions that go beyond the plain meaning of the law as enacted by Congress. With the insertion of gender identity and termination of pregnancy language, the Obama-era rules were understood to mean that should a doctor or medical institution voice ethical or religious objections to perform an abortion or do a cosmetic gender surgery, they could be referred to the Department of Justice for legal action and potentially risk losing federal funding. We are restoring respect to the rule of law, Roger Severino, the director of the Office of Civil Rights at HHS, said in a June 12th interview with Real Clear Politics. The Obama-era definition, he added, created extraordinary confusion in the science and medical fields. Since December 2016, federal courts have twice held the Obama regulations contravened religious freedom protections set forth in established civil rights statutes and other law protecting religious liberty. A group of clergy rallied elected officials and hundreds of New Yorkers last Wednesday for the Jericho March across the Brooklyn Bridge, where they were joined by law enforcement groups and seen worshiping together in a video that has been viewed more than 1 million times. Bishop Gerald Seabrooks of Rehoboth Cathedral in Bedford-Stuyvesant told Kings County Politics in an interview last week about the biblical meaning of Jericho. And if they did not tear down the walls of Jericho, division and separation, then they would not have received. Therefore, the walls of Jericho in our city need to come down. We see the walls of hatred. We see the walls of police brutality. We see the walls of redlining. We see the walls of miseducation. Our city needs God, Seabrook said about the purpose of the march. The event, which started in Cadman Plaza Park, Brooklyn, and ended at City Hall, was initially conceived by a coalition of black clergy who are calling for reforms to policing, healthcare, and education. Sergeants Benevolent Association, a police union in New York City, also joined the march, describing it as a rally to support law enforcement, as well as clergy, according to a flyer. This is a community that respects the police and wants peace, SBA President Ed Mullins told Gothamist about why they joined the march. Police are the dividing line to keep them safe. Videos of the march have been circulating online where hundreds are seen and heard singing the popular worship song Waymaker. The clip has amassed over 1 million views across various platforms. Israeli police arrested or detained 55 people in Jerusalem last night during massive protests against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Some 4,000 people demonstrated outside the premier's residence to call for his resignation, citing his government's poor handling of the ongoing COVID-19 crisis and the serious corruption charges against him. The protests began at sundown on Thursday and were largely peaceful. Demonstrators had signs, waved Israeli flags, blew noisemakers, and chanted against Netanyahu. Others gathered to protest police brutality and the killing of an unarmed autistic Palestinian man by Israeli police in May. A smaller pro-Netanyahu counter-protest was held nearby where police observed on the sidelines. The two pro- and anti-Netanyahu camps were separated by metal barricades. Police gave the protesters until 11 p.m. to demonstrate, after which they were required to leave in accordance with the city's sound ordinance law. Although most of the protesters had left by midnight, several hundred remained, ignoring calls by police to disperse. Around 12:30 a.m., police fired mounted water cannons at the protesters, scattering them. Officers formed a human chain and funneled the protesters down Agron Street towards Mamilla Mall. Israeli media reports that at times police continued to fire water cannons at protesters' backs as they were leaving the area. We left the protests quietly, without violence. They told us we couldn't disperse on the sidewalk nor in the park. We headed down the street, but apparently not fast enough for them. They stated they started spraying us from behind, one demonstrator named Dekel told the Times of Israel. The water cannons were sprayed at protesters at the top of Paris Square and the bottom of the street, effectively trapping flares protests on both sides. Coronavirus relief deal is in sight, but not without drama on Capitol Hill. The $1 trillion measure will provide aid for millions of Americans amid the pandemic. But with the time running out, a final deal has yet to be reached. Months after the House passed a Democratic-led bill, the White House is set to make a major concession when Senate Republicans unveil their plan. Inching closer to a deal with Republicans on the next phase of a congressional rescue package, President Trump is prepared to give in on a payroll tax cut. After calling it very important Monday, the president declared in a tweet Thursday that the Democrats has stated strongly that they won't approve a payroll tax cut. Too bad. And signaled his readiness to move on without it in a Republican relief package estimated to hit $1 trillion. This is about kids and jobs, said Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin outside the White House. The bill is set to provide up to $25 billion for COVID-19 testing and up to $105 billion to schools. Mnuchin said the Republican plan would decrease the level of unemployment insurance set to run out this month. This is intended to be wage replacement, so we're focused on the percentage, which is about 70%. So nobody's going to get more than $600, but again, if you were making $300, you're not going to get $600 this time, he said. Here's a recap of today's news. Iranian Christian convert loses appeal of prison sentences 18 months after arrest. China tells the United States to close consulate in Chengdu in growing spat. Thousands of Israelis gather in Jerusalem to protest Netanyahu as virus cases soar. Today's news was reported by CBN, The Christian Post, Christian Headlines, and Charisma News. My name is Russell Sarup, and this is Kingdom News. Until next time, do have a good evening.